say, "Hona to keep the thing going like a this." All right. So for us, many people have come to the Gullah Geechee Nation and asked me, as Queen Quet, chiefess and head of state for the Gullah Geechee Nation, how have you managed to maintain and retain your culture? How are you all so resilient? How have you been able to sustain it? Well, it's not just about keeping the language going, but it's about keeping a cultural community literally alive. So before we even go into this second edition of zooming in on sustainability, and in particular, zooming in on coastal sustainability scientifically with my guest today, I want us to take a moment of silence for those who are no longer with us. Brother George Floyd, who we laid to rest yesterday. Brother Ahmaud Arbery, who is a native of the Gullah Geechee Nation, from right here in Brunswick, Georgia, on the coast, the coastal empire, and for Sister Breonna Taylor. Because when we're talking about sustaining, you sustain by keeping life in people. You sustain by keeping life in Mother Earth. And now that they have literally gone to rest in the soil of Mother Earth, we would be remiss if we didn't take time right now to just take a moment to pause and reflect and give thanks for their lives bringing change, therefore meaning their lives were not in vain. Ashe, ashe, ashe. So I'm so glad if I had this opportunity this year, did anything like that. But start for bring we further in the discussion about equity, equality, and sustainability. It's very interesting for me to be able to come to you all digitally, because most of you who are familiar with me, you know that I'm a computer scientist, and I'm a computer scientist that tells you to unplug. That there's a lot that you're missing when you only sit there with a device in front of your hand. There's so much more right outside that you should take some time to enjoy before it's gone. People have often made the statement, God ain't making no more land. So if that is true, if we truly believe that, that means that we need to do what I've said for years. If Hona must take care of the root for heal the tree, but that means nurturing Mother Earth so she nurtures us, cradles us. As much as COVID-19 has been a really drastic situation that has caused the loss of lives, that has caused illness in people's bodies, we have to think about how do we still come out of this pandemic healthier? How do we even go through it healthier? Well, that's by usually having a healthy environment, a healthy diet, a healthy spirit, a healthy mind. These are things that help build your immunity. Well, this has been a topic over and over in environmental justice. Equity has been a topic over and over and over and over and over and over in indigenous communities and communities of people of color. As an environmental advocate and activist, almost all my life now, it has been interesting to watch the trajectory of what has happened and how every time these topics come up, the big part of it is who has the money to do anything, who has the time to do the things that it would take with the technology that's needed. These things are not small issues. But I came in contact with someone one day in Washington, D.C. In fact, one evening in Washington, D.C. We're at a reception. And this person comes over and introduces herself from a group called UCS. Maybe some of you just paused and wondered, what did she say? UPS? No, not UPS, UCS. So I paused too, because I hadn't yet heard of them. But when I heard what that abbreviation was for, I got really happy, because as a computer scientist and mathematician, I am a scientist. So I use both sides of my brain. I know most of y'all are getting me to sing and things like that. Y'all let's see me dance and all that kind of thing. So y'all think for artists. I am the artivist. I do my activism through the arts. I don't consider myself an artist. So here it is. She says UCS is the Union of Concerned Scientists. So of course, concerned people I want to be with. All right. I don't know about you, but I do. And I just radiated at the sound of the term scientist. So here we are, like I said, at a reception. People are eating, they're talking, they're chatting. I never thought this brief introduction would then lead to me going back north. Many of you know I've done a lot of work in the New York tri-state area over the years, educating people about Gullah Geechee culture, being an activist, being engaged and involved with a lot of the people that you see are out in the streets even now. And so here it is that talking with her that evening, we started to open up a dialogue that has led to, seems like just about a decade, we're approaching here, of working together in true collaboration and bringing that word concern to reality. And so right now, I am proud that I have someone joining me from up in New England. We're both still on the East Coast that's joining me today, and her name is Kate Sell. Now, you know, with all the police discussions, we don't want to hear that word Sell, but that's her last name. She ain't going to change it just for my show, y'all. That's just the way it is, y'all. I'll be all right. All right. So, yeah, so definitely I'm so happy that Kate Sell is here with us from the Union of Concerned Scientists. Kate, how honor to do today? We're not hearing you, Kate. Are you muted?
Not anymore.
There we go. Yes. How are you now? I know. Let me tell y'all right now. Now, the first time we got together, I said to her, these folks have kept talking. They kept talking in this meeting, and they kept talking. This is after we met in DC. We ended up another place in the meeting. They talking. And she said, good evening, everyone. Good evening. And I'm looking and I'm watching, and they talking. I'm saying, they're not hearing this poor lady. So I said to her, you want me to help? She said, if you would. And I said, good evening, everyone. The room stopped. I said, okay, Kate would like everyone to sit back down so we can get to work. And folks started moving. So ever since that day, I've teased her about how loud she is. So the fact that I couldn't hear her a minute ago, I started to say again, Kate, your voice can't get lower on me, darling. You got to keep that loud voice that you always have, you know? So yeah, glad we can hear you now, Kate. How you doing up there?
I'm doing great, and I'm so happy to be with you. It's always wonderful to see you and to talk to other folks in the Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank, and to be with you and your audience. Thank you for having me.
This is wonderful. So tell us a little bit about what is the Union of Concerned Scientists? What is it that you all really do? What's your mission, one might say? And then what's your position at the Union of Concerned Scientists?
Sure. So the Union of Concerned Scientists has been around for 50 years now. We are a national nonprofit working for what we ask for is a safer planet and a healthier world.
Mm-hmm.
We work on a range of issues, from climate change, which is my issue, to nuclear weapons, which is my husband's issue. He also works here. So we have about 200 plus staff in 4 offices around the country. Not yet in the South, though, so that's what I'm hoping that we can do next. Queen saying, come on down, back where I grew up. We have offices in Massachusetts, in Washington, D.C., in Chicago, and in Oakland, in California.
Excellent.
And I am the climate campaign manager at ECS. And what that means is that I have an amazing team that I work with, a team of scientists and outreach specialists. I see my colleague Alicia Race, who's our outreach lead, people who go out into the field to make sure that we're talking and that our science is relevant and useful to people. We have media special and communications specialists, and then we have Washington representatives who try to make sure that the priorities that we have and the priorities that our partners have are effectively represented on Capitol Hill. And that's what we do.
That's interesting, because I know in the years since I've met you, you and I have been in some very interesting places together. Baltimore, and it seemed like you weren't at the Boston meeting, but you connected me to people with the Climigration Network in Boston. And the best time ever was at Pocantico, New York, stuck together in a snowstorm. That I thought was memorable for sure. And I know out of the Pocantico meeting, we came out with a document that we wanted to push the envelope, push the agenda of the things you mentioned, in particular in relationship to climate change, and how various communities need this topic to be relevant, not only on local levels, but on national levels, and then elevating in the international forums at the United Nations and various events like the COP events that go on. And we mean the Council of Parties, not the COPs, okay, y'all? And so these are United Nations events that go on to discuss a lot of environmental issues around the world. And climate change, as many people have encapsulated it in the terminology of the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement has been something that we continue at the Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank and in the Gullah Geechee Nation to support. We never left out of it, don't care what anybody else said. We're not out of it. We are still in. There's a group that is called We Are Still In, and we're still working with them and with UCS and others. But as scientists, people would say, well, that sounds like advocacy work, or that sounds like activism work. Why would you do that? But you said something, Kate. You said outreach. Outreach. So the way you and I connected, to me, was part of you reaching out, saying, we're not yet working in your community, or we're doing it scientifically with data, but what about what the people have to say about that data? So why don't you tell us about some of the work you've done here, and why reach out to the people? Because more often than not, scientists kind of stay in their vacuum and work with data and don't necessarily realize people are attached to it. And then people in politics want to get the people only if they can get votes. So kind of tell us a little bit more about why you personally feel that the outreach is so necessary, especially when we're talking about environmental issues and equity.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I would say that science is intended to be in the public good. And it's not in the public good that the public don't access it,
right?
Don't use it, don't connect to it, don't inform it. That's not science that serves anybody. And so the work that we do at ECS, and I remember something that you said to me actually, one of the first meetings that we were at together in Baltimore, when we were first starting to produce some of our science on sea level rise, which obviously for the Gullah Geechee Nation as a coastal people should be relevant, we thought. But you took a look at it and said, I don't see myself, I don't see my people here in the way that you're presenting this. And we took that so much to heart. And since then have been working hard. I won't say hard enough. I won't say completely effectively, but hard nonetheless to change that so that we are speaking directly to people whose lives, whose livelihoods, the places where they live and work and play and worship, where climate change is affecting them. We want to help them to the degree that we can with our knowledge, see what change is coming, when is it coming, how much time do we have to prepare, how much will our existing traditional or community knowledge help us to prepare for that, and how can the work that we already do in our communities to be resilient to all kinds of stresses, from racism and police brutality and poverty in some cases, like the whole range of issues, including climate change. We've already learned to be resilient to an awful lot of that. Perhaps we could tell you how resilience actually gets built at the community level. And so that's why I feel like the relationship that you and I have built, Queen, and the relationship that the Union of Concerned Scientists has enjoyed with the Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank has been so mutual, because we're not just bringing y'all stuff, we're hearing from y'all what we need to incorporate.
Absolutely, and your southernness keeps coming out with you saying y'all. So here it is that as you spoke, and you said change. Many people have heard this song over the years. Some of you have heard me do it over the years because I used to sing it for many, many years, and people have heard it a lot. But it strikes me right now, as you're even saying what you said, it immediately popped in my head, just this line. I was born by a river in a little tent, and oh, just like that river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Now, when I met you, I never thought about the changes we'd be able to make, but we have been able to present together for various conferences, the National Adaptation Forum. We've presented, I know you and I have been at EPA events, and even the Gullah Geechee Nation's leaders have provided trainings for the EPA, which is almost non-existent right now, given the current US administration. But what you said about building relationships, building this partnership and sustaining it, collaborating where it is not a diagram that simply points downward with stuff dropping down, or points as this chart with everything leaving out of our community, but instead it's a circle. It is a circle where we inform the scientists about our culture, our community, because we are born by the rivers. We are born by the rivers. We live on the rivers. We live in the Atlantic Ocean. And so to see us not reflected in a document that talks about the flooding here, because the document you referred to in Baltimore was the one you did about the city of Charleston, the urban area. Well, right down the road a piece, as we would say, you have the rural areas that are literally on the rivers, right at the estuaries, right in the ocean. And more often than not, and you and I have talked about it, we've written grants and co-written things to talk about addressing equity in terms of financing the work that has to be done. And I know you brought some slides today to show some of that work in terms of sea level rise and climate change. And I want my audience to be able to see that, but that work takes money, not just time. It takes money, and it takes the type of scientific ability to amass the data and then put it forth in visuals nowadays that are easily shareable as well. But you can't do it and then y'all do it in the office and then give it to us and say, well, this is what y'all ought to use. I mean, it doesn't work that way. So it's a blessing to us that y'all realize that and didn't take offense and say, well, that's the way we always do it. Those are the natives. They don't really know. We've been told that many times before. Instead, you listened and said, well, yes, part of us reaching out is hoping the community reach back so that we can put together things together. And I've seen your presentation shift over time that seem more inclusive, that seem to become a little bit more circular, a little less linear than what us as scientists usually are used to. And so I'm wondering about that at this stage with a pandemic, with hurricane season, with climate change not stopping, but God willing, the environment healing a little because of the fact of the pandemic and people not moving as much. How do you see the relationship going forward? And what are the current projects y'all have going now that are even within these slides that our partners that are also part of Think Tank who are with us, who are running this for us today. We have Kylie at the University of Minnesota, who's behind the gauges that y'all don't see on screen, that'll bring up some of the slides in a little while for us. And we thank them because they have been an active part of this, and they too see what differences it makes when you listen to the community before you write your papers. You listen to the community before you make your PowerPoint. You listen to the community before you put a report out, and you let us vet it and reread it before it goes out. What made you open to that, Kate? And what is it that y'all are working on now that would help the community here in the Gullah Geechee Nation that you think?
Well, I'm so glad that you sang that song. I was listening to it myself last night, Queen.
Wow.
I was getting ready for this, and there's a line about, I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please.
Yes.
He pushes me back down on my knees.
Yes.
That's not the person I want to be.
Mm.
That's not a person, that's not a relationship I want to have with anybody.
Right.
And if you don't want to be that person, then you need to sit down and be quiet and listen to people who are experts of all kinds. I mean, I've met all kinds of experts within the Gullah Geechee Nation, within the think tank, within the council, who have a range of expertise that I can sit down and be quiet and learn from. Okay, and that's what's changed. If you don't want to be that brother or that sister, then the first thing to do is sit down and be quiet. And then I would say, in terms of work that we're doing now, we have been doing a lot of looking at how the COVID pandemic is being experienced in communities. There are big data problems that we've been trying to fight. Like many places are not recording adequately the fact that how heavily this disease is being borne, particularly in Black communities around this country. And we have been working on building our own data sets to try to capture that risk and that loss. It's a terrible loss to our country. We have also been looking at how it's going to intersect with climate impacts coming. We're a week into the hurricane season, and we've had our third named tropical storm already.
Yes.
How are you going to get people safely out of the way
in a pandemic?
In a pandemic, if you can't move them into the traditional shelter model because you can't keep the social distance required, how are you going to keep people cool in a heat wave if the cooling centers aren't open, if they can't go to the movies, you know, on a hot afternoon to just cool their bodies down? How are you going to think about the wildfire season, which in some parts of the country is projected to be intense? How are those people going to manage? We're looking at inland flooding, same thing. And what we're doing now is we're looking at, okay, where is the infection projected to be? And what are the climate impacts that we can expect to interact with that, so that we can, again, try to give communities some warning. Here's what's coming your way. And here's what, you know, some things that you all might need to be discussing in order to prepare for that. And so again, we're welcoming feedback from communities on how we're doing that work. I've been talking a while, Queen, so forgive me.
No, I love it. No, I love what you're saying because it's so on point. Because again, for those who aren't familiar, the Gullah Geechee Nation encompasses North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Well, the COVID spikes are North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. The numbers continue to increase because they reopened before other places when they never really fully shut down. People have been congregating and driving around and hanging out with their family and their friends, and people were out here demanding to go to beaches and all kinds of stuff. And the minute they said, oh, Memorial Day, because it's a tourist, tourist region, open the beaches. Towns along our coast, the mayors had thought it would be better to protect their citizens, so they had blocked coming across bridges onto beach areas. And then the governors, and you had county council members threatening, chairman in Charleston County in particular, threatened all the beach town mayors and said he was going to take them to court if they didn't open the beaches. So now the reports are going out with all these people going to the beach now being infected, that these infection rates they're seeing. People are saying, well, the numbers rising high is because of the protests. No. 2 weeks ago, the numbers are coming up from Memorial Day weekend, not from last weekend with protests. They're coming out now because of Memorial Day weekend. And so people are not looking at, even when we talk about coastal sustainability, the people who are leaders here and political elected officials, we have a duty to protect our citizens, and we have to protect their health. And we have to try to do it even when things are not in our control at all. We can't have a meeting with the hurricanes and go, well, look, you know, we can't really put up with y'all this year because pandemic is here. So please don't visit Cristobal. Please don't visit, you know, que pasa Cristobal. You know, we can't do it. It doesn't work. You know, they're still coming. And whether we want to see them or not, they visit, and they're not visitors you like because they moved your furniture and your household all around. So in the midst of it, like you're saying, these are things that I and other leaders here have been really focused on, is how are we going to get the word out while people are protesting, rightfully protesting. How do we get them to not forget, though, it's hurricane season already? So I hope you did your preparedness first. Then if you're going out in the streets, prepare also for that with as much covering as you can. You really can't social distance in a rally and in a protest. Really, you cannot, because the energy you're in at that moment pulls you together. That's the whole point you're there with people, is because we're there for togetherness. And so balancing all that out, I'm happy that UCS contacted us early on, wanting our feedback, wanting us to give you a report on how are things looking here. First of all, how are we feeling? That we appreciated. You wanted to know, how are we feeling? Are we okay? I just got the first report of someone here that I know very well that's in the hospital right now. We're praying for him with COVID. But his wife believes he got it because he left here and went and visited his father in Georgia, in inland Georgia, and then came back and now has this. So now she's, you know, emotional about it and trying to think of how she's going to sustain things while he's in the hospital. He's been in there a week already. And so, you know, these are dynamics that people don't realize the real impact it can have. Like you said earlier on, the word relationship, the real relationships we built, and even building relationships with communities where they trust us to provide them with information, like you said, to inform them of things that are literally coming their way and that will sweep this coast. So we got to look at climate change, we got to look at hurricane season, we got to look at all that in the midst of a pandemic, and the economic aspect that has on people when there isn't a pandemic, much less now. And if someone's immune system is not functioning well, they're not usually a good candidate to try to evacuate them anyway. So we have all that to deal with. And you all have done some work with some things that you sent over. And I want people, before we close out, Kate, to at least see what the slides are. So if Kylie would put on the screen the slides that you actually sent over, I'd like folks to see what it is, because right now, you mentioned a little while ago the heat wave. And so this slide says, how hot Charleston? Well, I can tell y'all right now, the day they told me on St. Helena Island, when I spoke into my remote control, it told me it was 89 degrees, but that it felt like 94 due to humidity. So what is this right here that you're documenting, Kate, and why is it so important for us to get this kind of information out, given all of what I just outlined?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Well, so I'm so glad you talked about the feels like temperature, right? The thermometer tells you one thing, but your body feels something else. That's what we're working with here in this work, okay? This is from a report that we put out last summer called Killer Heat, that looks at how climate change is going to affect our experience of extreme heat and humidity together, it feels like temperature or the heat index over time. Okay, again, because we're about how much time do we have and what choices can we make now that make that future brighter for ourselves. Okay, so this is a tool that anybody can go to on our website. I should have put the URL on there, but I didn't. But
tell them what it is, and those who watch Gullah Geechee TV later on, because we always take these broadcasts and then we put them at www.gullahgeechee.tv, and we'll have that right here on the bottom of the screen for y'all to see, so that you know the website. But tell them the website, Kate.
Well, our website is ucsusa.org. I'm really hoping my colleague Alicia will paste in the chat the link to this particular tool. But if you Google UCS and killer heat, you'll get to this, okay? And you can say, all right, where am I? Well, today we're talking about Charleston. What can we expect? And you can choose how hot do you want to think about. And I chose, because Charleston is going to get hot. How hot you can choose. So I said, okay, above 105 degrees heat index. And you will see this is what we found when we looked at this. By the middle of this century, you have 38 degrees over 105 degrees heat index, where what you're used to is like 4 a year, okay? And by the end of the century, you could have 2.5 full months of that level of misery of heat index.
Wow.
But if we take action now, strong action now, to reduce the amount of carbon pollution that we pour into the air, that's pollution that we generate when we drive our cars, or when we burn electricity, or when we eat a lot of meat, or when we fly. If we reduce that sharply with strong, bold action that starts now, we can have 24 days like that in Charleston. That's still 20 more than we're used to.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants that number, but it's better than 2.5 months. I think we'd agree. Okay.
I would definitely agree with you, for sure.
And I would say also that I'm looking away just because I wanted to look quickly at my notes. That this is just over 105. There's another threshold that we looked at, which is just what we're calling off the charts, where it's the heat index is so high that you can't reliably calculate it anymore. That's a heat index above 127 degrees.
Wow.
And Charleston could see more than a week of that if we don't act. Whereas you might see a day like that if we do.
Now, let me ask you this. Would that happen in Charleston as opposed to see like where I'm at here in St. Helena that looks like what you see behind me because of heat islands that also get created? There are these things called heat islands. Is that part of why those numbers are so much higher in an urban setting?
No, this doesn't even take what you're talking about, the urban heat island effect. It doesn't really take that into account.
Wow. So this is just with the normal humidity.
Yeah, some places it will be worse than that if there's a lot of concrete and not shade and not relief for people. Okay, so that when we think about how hot do we want, we get to choose our future by the actions we take today. And this is what, when you ask yourself, how hot do you want to be? This is the choice that we're facing right now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
See your next slide, because
a lot of time, Queen. Are we okay to go on?
We want to at least get in your next slide before we close out the show. So now you went from how hot to how wet. So what's this about?
This is about how much sea level rise are we going to see, and what are the impacts of that sea level rise going to be. So we're actually, when we talk about sea level rise at UCS, we're talking about a particular thing, which anybody who's lived on a coast will understand, which is that the sea level may rise uniformly, but what we see on the East Coast is 2 high tides a day. And if those tides are correspondingly higher, because we've raised the sea level further, and our tidal zone moves further and further inland. And that's what we're talking about here. And here we have defined what we call chronic inundation, okay, where you are flooded by the high tide. 10% of your buildable land mass is flooded at high tide at least 26 times per year. Okay, so basically that's with your full moon and your new moon, which is when you always get the highest tides anyway, right? So, and just so people understand, like Miami Beach in Florida has gotten a lot of press for what they call sunny day flooding, where the tide just comes rolling in. There's no storm, clear blue sky, but the streets are full of water.
Yes.
Okay. That's what we're talking about. That's tidal flooding. That's what it looks like. Miami Beach has spent $600 million to alleviate that. They do not yet qualify for our definition of chronic inundation.
Really?
They're not yet flooded 26 or more times per year with 10% of the land that they could build on. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about in this slide. And you can here we're actually looking at how many people, because we have to care about people.
Absolutely.
How many houses that these people live in, all right? How much of the property tax base is at risk by getting flooded regularly like this. And I'll just quickly say that in Charleston, by 2045, under what we consider a reasonable sea level rise scenario, it says high sea level rise on the slide. This work is a few years old. This is the likely scenario for us. Is that 1,629 of today's homes are at risk in Charleston Central. This is 16% of the community's homes. They're worth $1.333 million. And they contribute $11 million to the tax base. Okay. And then if I could just go quickly to the next slide, because I think this is super important when you think about equity in this context. This is what it starts to look like by 2100, by the end of this century. Again, assuming that we don't take strong action, okay? By then, Charleston is looking at 70% of its homes being chronically inundated, all right? That's $39 million of the tax base. Those homes house 12,500 people. Okay. And the other thing I want to say is you'll see that North Charleston looks safer.
Safer, right.
But where are those people in the more risky places going to go?
Exactly.
So now we're talking climate gentrification. Now we're in a fundamentally equity-driven issue.
Exactly.
And so that's why when I think about the equity implications of this work, they are right there in this slide.
Right.
Okay. I hope that's clear.
I appreciate it. Oh, yeah, that is wonderful. So now, Kylie, you could take that slide off. This is the thing. As we close out today, I'm glad we're closing out on this note about equity and what we do right now. Many of you watching me are the folks who have stood with us. You're members of the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition. If you're not yet a member, go to gullahgeechee.net, GULLAHGEECHEE.net, and you can do gullahgeechee.biz, and you can pay for membership there. You all have seen us fighting a situation for the past several months, which is the building of another resort under the terminology ecotourism here on these sea islands. If you look at the imagery behind me, we're not even talking about something that looks like this. We're talking about a sand spit that you can just see the white soil there, but yet they want to build a resort on it with multiple buildings. So what happens is that place where they want to build doesn't have a bridge or anything, but they want this exclusive resort pushed through and approved during the pandemic, during the hurricane season. They're talking about this with Beaufort County Council in South Carolina. So people have signed on a petition at change.org that says stop destructionment at Bay Point. Stop the destructionment at Bay Point. If you want to get that direct link, email me at gullgeeco@aol.com. Why the term destructionment? Destructionment encompasses gentrification. You just heard Kate mention that this is an equity issue, because what happens is those who have the financial wherewithal and also who are not generally culturally place-based people will pick up and migrate in a minute. They will sell a house, they'll flip it, somebody just offers them the money, they'll go. That is not Gullah Geechee tradition. That's not indigenous people's tradition. We are inextricably tied to the land. So there is inundation from flooding. There's a heat wave. We still have nowhere that we're going, because we can't pick up an entire nation of people and move all of our cousins, all of we family and things like that, and we did another rest of place. It doesn't work. Again, in these meetings that Kate and I have been in, the issue of climate migration, that's why I'm part of the Climate Migration Network, and one of the leaders for that, has been discussed repeatedly because of these same factors. Sunny day flooding, saltwater inundation to areas that could be agricultural land, sea level rise, climate change, and just pure greed that tends to say, well, guess what? If where we build, we can no longer fill and build because we still want the coast, what we'll do is we'll migrate inland. As we migrate inland, then we want to push out the people who've been there for generations. So it becomes an equity issue. Who can afford to stay where they are? Who can afford to maintain the ownership of their land where they are? So we focused on land reclamation, not only with working on environmental justice and physically working in the environment to replant things, to keep our maritime forests here, which is what make up the Sea Islands, okay? But also to fight to make sure our people are educated on how these charts, how these maps, and how these things go into agendas that make for inequity and that continue the displacement largely of communities of people of color, largely of indigenous people. And here, you know who we be. We be Gullah Geechee anointed people, and we don't see all of this shit full now. So before we had the American terminology for it, such as gentrification, they told us urban renewal, which we said was Negro removal, okay? So that means put the people out, bring in new people. So whenever those folks move there and something is not working for them again, they move again, and the people in the next place are supposed to move again too. Well, where are we going to move this time? We're asking you to move with us. Be part of this collaboration. Be part of a movement to take action now. Like Kate has said over and over, the actions we take today will define our future. And I'm so happy that you're concerned. And you're a concerned scientist, Kate, that I know you would say, I'm not actually a scientist, even though I work for Union of Concerned Scientists, but because you're in the group, you are one of the people that truly, to me, has brought the concern of equity to the community. And we're gonna be building on this conversation that you've given us slides to look at today, next week, when I bring on our lawyers that have helped us have to fight legal battles against the things that you talked about with me here today, and how we've used the words of power through song and every movement we talked about in the first episode when I had Kwame Shah here, because this is Black Music Month. And so I'm so happy that during Black Music Month, we were both spiritually led to the song, A Change Is Gonna Come, and that you would bring up that second verse that I stopped short of singing, that when I go to my brother, and I said, brother, help me, please. I'm happy that I could go to my sister in the environmental movement and say, help me. And you came and said, no, help me, right? And that we both said, well, let's help each other. And so that we could help others to sustain their communities in spite of all that we see happening in the world. And so just before we leave out, do you have any final words of light that you want to share with the viewing audience before we sign off today? And all of you who want to keep up with what's going on and things like that, you can always find me at Gullah Geechee on Twitter and on Instagram, and also follow GullahGeecheeNation.com. GullahGeecheeNation.com, which is our blog, and we repost these videos there as well under the announcements of our guests. And I'm so happy that my guest today is Kate Sell of the Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank and the Union of Concerned Scientists. Any words of light and love before we depart?
Thank you. I would just say that it is so clear to me that we get racial justice and climate action together, or we get neither.
Yes.
I will not accept neither, so it has to be both.
Right.
Y'all call on me if there's any service that we can provide. And thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it, Queen.
Thank you to Hannah, Kate. Thank you to all of Hannah children what join. We write you in the chat. If you have questions and you have comments about the broadcast and you want to know what else will be zooming in on, and you want to make sure you get the notices to that, again, follow GullahGeecheeNation.com and email me at GULLGEECO@AOL.com. GoGeeko@AOL.com. Yes, I have a retro email address, AmericaOnline.com. I'm still with them. All right. But what we want to do is get you online to working with us. Follow us at Gullah Geechee Nation on Facebook and Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition on Facebook as well. And you'll see daily us posting about how you can engage in this movement to definitely sustain the coastal environment, but also our cultural heritage along the coast. So I'm looking forward to your comments and your questions by email, and tanky. And we pray that we breathe some life into this situation and breathe some more breath of life into you. And that life will help us all to grow. And once again, as I always say, Hunter must take care of the root for heal the tree. So we're glad that you zoom in with we, but dig a little deeper about this kind of sustainability in the coastal community. Peace and blessing, everybody.